we got Ben on right now. Ben Strober is big part of the stations, 106.7 The Fan in particular, where he's an update anchor, a producer. He hosts the Locked On Wizards podcast. You can get that at Locked On Wizards. And Ben is a Terp. I know that. And you can follow Ben on X at Strober Sports. So I'll just start with this. Like, who do you want them to take? I mean, and then who do you think they'll take?
I want them to take AJ Dybantsa first overall, and I think that ultimately is going to be the pick. I feel like if you draft Dybantsa, now that you've locked in Trae Young as your point guard of the future for the next foreseeable 4 years here, which is a bit long to my liking, but at the end of the day, I think you're establishing an identity here that's going to be focused on generating looks at the rim, putting pressure on the rim, something they haven't done particularly well over the last couple of seasons. Well, you have some of your other ancillary pieces on the wing in Keyshawn George, Trey Johnson. These are going to be the guys you look in the drive and kick options to be your knockdown three-point shooters. But adding a guy like Dybantsa with his ability to get to the free throw line, get touches in the paint, finish at the basket. I think he was over 5.5 field goals at the rim per game, which was one of the best marks in all of college basketball last year, or maybe was the best. I'd have to go double check on that. I ultimately think that's the direction they go in, and I think that's the one that I want the most as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that at his size, with his length, and by the way, with his aggressiveness, because one of the things I liked about him at BYU, he's an alpha. Like he was, I think he played 6 40-minute games in his last 14 or 15. But you should be able, at his size, if you're going to be the first pick in the draft, to finish at a high rate at the rim. Let me back up for a moment. You aren't a big fan, it sounds like, of the Trae Young deal. What would you have preferred?
I would have preferred 3 years on the deal as opposed to 4, which has that player option tied to it on the final year as well.
Yeah.
The money is the money. And I guess my first reaction when I found out what the deal was is, wow, that's a lot more money than we anticipated, because this 3 years, $120 million thing was thrown around for what felt like months, what we thought this extension would look like. I think, to me, this indicates there was some sort of market for him, because I feel like this front office would be smart enough to understand that $53 million annual for Trae Young is a lot for him at this point in his career. But you do run the risk of losing him altogether completely, which at the end of the day, they didn't give up anything really to get him. They had an expiring deal they cut off of in CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert, whose contract was not the worst, but kind of looked at as a negative asset at this point, not somebody they had in their long-term future plans. But then you miss out on your floor general for this team. The reason they brought him in was to be more competitive. They think he can elevate the young players around them currently. So if you run the risk of losing him altogether and having to look elsewhere, you might end up overpaying on somebody else that's probably not as good. Because this notion that Trae Young is not a good basketball player is completely false, in my opinion. I understand he's a very negative defender, but in terms of what his offensive production is, and I think it will be now that he's had a full year pretty much to get his body healthy back right again, I think he's going to be a really good offensive player. He should make players around him better, and I think he's ultimately a great guy to have around for whoever this number 1 overall pick is, because their number 1 priority is going to be molding whoever they take first overall tonight into their franchise player.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I'll come back to that in a moment. So, I actually think, and I'm not a massive Trae Young fan, but I agree with you. He is a playmaker, and he can really create, and he can really score. But I love the thought of him and AD playing together. That's a 2-man combination, point guard and big, that I actually think really will work. And I think that they see that too. And they'd like to see what it looks like with all of their young players sort of being in a, I've called it, a real developmental environment where the games actually mean something and they're trying to win it. It's a much better way to evaluate Koulibaly and Sarr and Carrington and Trey Johnson and Will Riley and Keyshawn George, et cetera. And I think that's what they were going for. And let's hope, fingers crossed, Anthony Davis plays 70-plus games, because I think you and I have talked about this before. I think they could win 45-plus and be a 5 or a 6 seed next year in the East. If that happens, that's a big if. But back to the signing of Trae Young, I agree with you. Like, I can't imagine that they would overpay by this much if there wasn't another suitor or two willing to get close. So if that's true, first of all, Atlanta screwed up because they didn't think that he was going to have nearly that much value. They took an expiring contract and Corey Kispert back, as you said. Number two is, do you have any idea who those teams may have been that would have come with, a true max offer, because it would have been max from those teams, not from the Wizards, but with something resembling 4 for 212? Who were those teams, do you think?
To my knowledge, there's no official reporting of who the teams are, but the names that have been thrown around are Brooklyn and Chicago. The Nets have the 6th overall pick in this draft, and there's a lot of speculation that they go with one of the guard options that's available for them, whether it's going to be Keaton Wagler or Darius Acuff or somebody different altogether. I feel like that seems like what the play that Brooklyn would make, unless they had somebody else in mind. I know there's been these smoke screens that they could take Nate Ament as high as 6 overall. I don't really see that happening. I don't think he's deserving of going top 10 in this draft. Chicago is interesting as well, because I'm not exactly sure what the rationale would be, but a lot of the understanding that I have about this entire situation is that the new proposed lottery reforms, which are now, I guess, official, they made official a few weeks ago, have really made teams that are fearful of finishing at the bottom feel like it's necessary to go out and get some proven talent like Trae Young, because if you finish in that bottom 3, you're in a very, very bad spot now. You're by no means guaranteed to even be in the top 5 if you finish with the worst record in terms of your pick. You could fall all the way to 12 now, and your odds of even landing a top pick are worse than the teams that finish 4 through 10 or whatever it is. So Young is kind of looked at as this floor raiser type of player because what he is offensively right now. And I think the Wizards ultimately, by locking him in, have kind of put themselves in a position where even if they're not ready to take the next step and be a contender in the next year or so here, which it still might take a little bit more time than that, they're not going to be a bottom 3 team in the league, which is now actually the worst place to be. Funny enough that being at
they
the
hit
bottom
the timing
is
right. Yeah, the timing was perfect for them. The last lottery that hopefully they're in for a while. I mean, they might be in some lottery. They could be in the lottery next year if AD plays 30 games.
Right.
But the timing worked out perfectly. All right, back to molding their number 1 pick into the future franchise player. So should I assume from that you don't think that any of their other young players are future franchise type of players?
Yeah, that's correct. I don't think they have the franchise altering talent on the roster until 8:05 p.m. tonight. I think that's ultimately what you're looking at here. Not to say that Alex Sarr and Keyshawn George, who I adore right now, I think those are some of the 2 best youngest players they have right now, and maybe both top 5 players from that draft class respectively, which is considered a weak one. But to me, those seem like great pieces on a really good contending team. They don't seem like the true number 1 option. It's so important in the NBA that if your number 1 option is who you're looking at to be the moon, the sun, the entire solar system of your operation, they have to really be up for it. They have to be a true number 1 option in this league. And I think the mistake that the previous administration did, obviously, with Beal, is they believed him to be that type of player when he never exactly was. You need somebody that really can win you a lot of basketball games, put you in a position to actually have a real chance when you get to the playoffs. So I think George and Sarr and a lot of the other young pieces they have right now, I really like Trey Johnson as well. Those could even be potentially all-star players at some point, but all NBA level, I'm not sure at this point. Maybe a guy like Sarr could be an all NBA player, all defensive player at some point, but these guys are not going to win you the championship on their own right now. And I don't think that ever will happen with just those guys.
All right, fast forward to, let's just say, March of next year. And the Wizards have had great health as it relates to Anthony Davis specifically. And, they're hovering in that, 4, 5, 6, 7 range in the East. Give me their starting lineup right now.
So Trae Young is obviously your lead point guard. No questions there. I think Keyshawn George starts at the 2 for this team. And I know that's a bit of a hot take, and a lot of people have questions whether or not he's quick enough to keep up with some of the other fast guys that will have the ball out on the perimeter. But in terms of what you need defensively, Keyshawn George has some of the best two-way ability on this team, just because you haven't quite seen enough of the offensive stuff through the first 3 years of Bilal Coulibaly. I think Trey Johnson's a great candidate, started the 2 as well, but I could see him being their spark plug off the bench. That's just a knockdown 3-point shooter. I think he fits in that role really well. So Trae Young, Keyshawn George, you're going to have AJ Dybantsa, if that is indeed the pick, starting at the 3, Anthony Davis at the 4, then Sarr at the 5.
Okay. And so Koulibaly, Trey Johnson, Will Riley. Who am I missing?
Bub Carrington could be a combo guy coming off the bench as a shooter as well. I'm interested to see what happens with a guy like Jaden Hardy.
Yeah,
Maybe
me
he gets
too.
thrown into a
I
trade.
thought he shot it really well after the trade.
He did, and they have the trade exception, which they do have to use at some point, before July 9th. So maybe he could be packaged in something. The one thing I want to know is, will this team be aggressive tonight and try to trade back into the first round?
Well, that's my next question on my list.
Let's get into that then.
Do you think they will be aggressive trying to trade back into the draft? And if so, who's it for, or what is it for?
I think they do get aggressive at some point. The precedent from this front office is there for it. In all 3 years that they've had a draft class to work with, 2023, 24, and 25, they have had some form of movement. In 2023, they traded up one spot to get Bilal Coulibaly. In 2024, they shocked everybody, traded Denny Avdia on draft night, got the 14th pick, and acquired Bub Carrington in that trade. And then last year, they traded back 3 spots, got Will Riley, but they were able to use one of those picks they got from Utah to get Jameer Watkins, who I think will be a pivotal guy coming off the bench, playing some defense for him as well. Hopefully, he can develop his 3-point shot. So I think if they're going to try to trade up into this draft, whether it's in the late lottery or even in the lower 20s, or something like that, you're looking at them trying to go after one of these front court options, because we know that Anthony Davis probably is not long for this Wizards organization. I think Trae Young getting that extension should be enough evidence that Anthony Davis probably is not getting extended by the organization. That would have to happen in August. But if Davis is only here for half a season or one full season, whatever it may be, I think you need to go find the succession plan for it. Somebody that's going to play next to Sarr long term. And there's a lot of good options in this draft. My favorite is Morez Johnson out of Michigan, but I feel like he's probably destined to go in the top 12. So might cost a lot if you're trying to get back into that spot. But there's other options if you're looking in the 20s for somebody. Chris Senak Jr. out of Houston, Hans Steinbach, if he's available at some point, out of Washington, could be another option you could get. He's pretty versatile. Terrace Reed Jr. from UConn. There's a good amount of options. I think they could be interested later in the first round in the front court. That's what I would do.
But you think it's a front court player that they would be trading back in for?
I'd imagine, because I think if you set your front court up for the future to be Sarr and whoever you take, like if they get Morez Johnson and AJ in this draft, they are set for a really long time, in my opinion.
If they ended up taking Peterson, which would surprise you, what would be your reaction to it?
I'd be pretty excited about it still. Darryn Peterson is an unbelievable prospect. He's one of the better guard prospects we've seen in recent years. Just sheer talent, scoring the basketball, the ability to score at multiple levels is very impressive. It scares me a little bit. I know the medicals check out. Like, they're not able to withhold that stuff. So all the reporting that's been done by Shams, Jeremy Wu, indicates that the medicals are not really a concern. And that's probably why he goes number 2 overall at this point. Another thing with him is, will he be able to put more pressure on the rim than he did in his freshman season? Will the playmaking numbers go up a little bit? Because obviously if you're drafting Peterson, you're not molding him into your lead guard, at least for not until probably his second contract at this point, because Trae Young is going to be here for the foreseeable future, obviously, after the extension yesterday. I don't see Darryn Peterson as a point guard in the NBA. I see him as a great bona fide shooting guard in this league that can score at multiple levels. I think he's a tremendous prospect, and I'd have no doubts about what the future looks like for the organization if they did take him tonight. I'd be excited about it.
Yeah, his people seem to think that he is a point guard. I'm with you. I actually think there's great versatility. I think he could play with the ball in his hands to start and initiate possessions, but I think he can play off the ball too, which is why I would not be afraid of him and Trae Young together in the same backcourt, even early in his career, if it goes that way. Give me a player sort of outside the top, or the perceived top 4, which would include, after the mentioned, Boozer and Caleb Wilson. Give me you've already mentioned Morez Johnson. Give me a couple of players that you just really like, not necessarily for the Wizards, but just players that you really like.
I like Braden Burries a lot. The point guard
from
Arizona.
I like a lot of the Arizona players.
He is mocked, I believe most things have him going number 9 to Dallas. I think that's a really good fit. I think he's going to play really well with Cooper Flagg in Dallas. He's one of my favorite guys in this draft for sure. I don't think of the other guys that I could really see. I like Acuff offensively. He's a tremendous scoring guard, and I think he's going to be instantly a really good offensive player in this league. He just didn't try at all defensively, which is really interesting to me. I don't know if that was just the way that they wanted him to play because they needed him so badly to produce on offense at Arkansas, but he really didn't give any type of effort on that side of the basketball. He's a little bit undersized, so I understand the concerns or limitations people perceive with his game, but I like Acuff a lot. I think he's going to be a tremendous scorer.
Talking to Ben Strober, Ben and Toby tonight, 9 to 11 on 980 with draft coverage. Following the Junkies from 7 to 9, they'll be live from the Anthem. Let me just get your thoughts on the Giannis trade before I let you run. If you're a Milwaukee fan, would you have preferred this deal with Miami or the deal that Boston had out there, which included Jaylen Brown and I think 2 firsts?
It's tough because if you look at the details of everything, like personally, I don't know if Giannis is really worth as much as this entire saga has been made out to be. If I were the Bucks, I would have traded him a year ago, if we're being honest. I'm not sure if his value would have been more back then, but given the injury stuff we've seen for Giannis, he struggled to be available, and I guess some of that was maybe constructed intentionally because the Bucks were kind of tanking at the end of the year a little bit, and they had the idea that they were going to trade Giannis. I just don't really know if this move makes the Heat a finals contending team is the way I want to perceive this. I don't know how much better it makes them. They're going to be better than whatever they were last year, which was barely in the play-in, missing the playoffs altogether. But I don't know if it was really worth Miami giving up guys like Yaku Chonis, who I think is actually a pretty good piece. He can shoot the ball really well. He torched the Wizards last year.
Yeah,
I think the Miami package was good enough for what the Bucks are trying to do here and kind of establish this new identity and rebuild the roster a little bit. I think that package was good for them.
What do the Celtics do with Jaylen Brown now?
So from what I've heard from people that are at the draft, they feel like the situation, the relationship between Brown and Tatum is not good at this point in time. I don't really understand why there's been this notion to break up that duo for a while now, but if the relationship is really soured in a way that's that prevalent, then I guess it's going to be a situation where they end up trading Brown somewhere else. I'm not sure the details of like what other teams exactly are going to be in on him. Do you remember any of the teams that were like thrown out in some of these rumors? I can't remember at this time.
No, other than Milwaukee.
I don't have any idea who would go get him.
Portland, I think it maybe has some interest there, but yeah. I just think if I'm a Bucks fan, I would have taken Jaylen Brown over Giannis in terms of those two players. Giannis just isn't available. Jaylen Brown is, and I think it. I mean, it's crazy to say this, but I think he's underrated. I think it's because he's played with Tatum, but let's not forget he was the MVP of not only the Eastern Conference Finals that year, but the NBA Finals.
Right.
In that particular year. I'm just a big Jaylen Brown fan. I think he's a killer. And if I were Milwaukee, I would have wanted something back for the player. It's kind of like, the Myles Garrett trade. It's like, if I'm going to give up Myles Garrett, I'm getting Jared Verse back. If I'm giving up Giannis, I'm getting something back that, it's not even about selling it, but something that I know can lead me to being competitive. But they took the Miami deal, and that is a future deal for Bucks fans. Ben, great job. Appreciate it. Enjoy tonight. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Ben Strober at Strober Sports on X, and he and Toby will be doing the draft show from 9 to 11 following the Junkies tonight from 7 to 9.